If you're going to do great things in life, then you have to believe you have it in you to do it. We're picking topics we believe are relevant to the marketplace and then inviting the core constituents to help drive that.
We obviously have a vested interest in the success of the state. And so we have these organizations pitching in, coming in, willing to lend their thoughts, their time, their expertise. And I think it starts to become a coalition.
Thanks for joining us on this week's BizCast powered by Google. I'm Amanda Marlowe, and today we have brought the BizCast on the road. We are here at the Rebellion Group in Cheshire. We're joined by CEO Bryn Tindall and Senior Vice President of Client Services, Sam Barrett.
Thanks for having us.
Welcome to the BizCast. We're really excited to be here. First, I want to dive in a little bit. Bryn, I'll start with you. You have both of you guys have really fascinating stories about how you got here. But Bryn, just tell us a little bit about you. This isn't your first business endeavor.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know I come from a large family. I have nine sisters and two brothers, so a large family in Colorado. And I was also homeschooled. And it's kind of important because my dad had businesses, and in those businesses, we were his workers. And because we were homeschooled, we were available. So, for years and years and years, grew up running family-based businesses instead of going to school, right? And so when I think back to where did this all start, that very early age of understanding what went into building a business, running a business, and so forth. We're involved at all levels of the company. So I don't know if I realized it at the time, but watching so many of the things he was going through and doing, some good, some bad, I was filing it away as I sort of began to put the thinking in place to sort of step out of my first venture. Yeah,
that entrepreneurial spirit started really as a young child.
Yeah, very early. Yeah.
And what about you? Tell us a little bit kind of about your background and what shaped you.
My background, I feel like specific to marketing is pretty atypical. So I was in the U.S. Army, and this is 2005 when I went, and I was in the Ranger Regiment. So I was with 2nd Ranger Battalion. I deployed 4 times to Iraq and Afghanistan, and then I got done with military service completely in 2011. And I was one of those people that really did not plan ahead when getting out of the Army. And I didn't realize, I think, the impact of kind of switching all of that off. One of the, there's kind of 3 different pillars that I realized that I had that I lost after the military, which is purpose, direction, and community. And it took a while to kind of realize what that sense of loss meant. But I started to regain that when I was going back to school in Seattle. And then I started a nonprofit for at-risk and homeless veterans. And so, which was really around event production, which is kind of leans into the shaping stuff that we do here. And I organized Seattle's largest resource fair that existed for the veteran community in the city. And so, but then quickly after, in 2012, my wife and I moved to the UK. And so, again, it was one of those things where, I started something brand new again, and this time in a foreign country, and I didn't have a job, and I hadn't finished school. And, I realized that nobody in London required their doors being kicked in or to get into gunfights. And so I had to figure out what I was going to do out there. So I went back to school. I got my master's degree, and then I fell into media and marketing. And so I did that for the 10 years that we were living there, and then moved back here. And I did some consulting for a couple different companies and agencies, and then I just happened to see Rebel because I was like, what does the agency make up here in Connecticut? And I was looking around at different agencies, and I saw their site. I'm like, these guys look cool, and their site reminded me of agencies I had worked in London for. So I called Bryn, and he said, "Do you want to come in?" I was like, "Yes, I do." So, and then ended up working here, and been here for a year and a half, and I think it's been awesome because Bryn and I and a couple other folks here like BJ, Mel, and others, we've kind of taken this idea of shaping CT's future and kind of turned it into this huge engine which has been awesome.
And we're going to go back to, we're going to get into shaping CT's future in just a minute. But, you mentioned this company felt comfortable. It felt like something that you wanted to be a part of. Bryn, can you talk a little bit about finding, it used to be the Rebellion Group, and then kind of the transition and what this company's become for you?
Yeah, I started Rebel Interactive.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and that's
Sorry.
okay. No, it's all right. Started Rebel Interactive in 2013. This was on the heels of a series of other ventures that I had formed. I moved up to Connecticut in right after 9/11, 2001, and ran a couple agencies, built an ESP, just a bunch of different things, right? And then right around 2013, I saw an opportunity to build another agency that was focused around disruption. This was coming on the heels of, brands like Kodak being almost obsolete overnight, and the BlackBerry, and on and on and on. And so I thought the positioning of a rebel, in terms of agent of change, was the idea. If I were to ask you, are you a rebel? The answer in almost every case is yes. Most people believe that they are rebels, and it means different things to different people. But the way most people look at it, like, am I an independent thinker? Am I willing to take chances? Am I in control of my destiny? So when you start to ask yourself those questions, then you are a rebel, right? And so one of the original positionings of the brand was the tagline of "Find Your Rebel." And what we meant by that was, if you're going to do great things in life, then you have to believe you have it in you to do it. And we were associating the word rebel with that inner essence, that inner belief that you could do amazing things, right? Fast forward 12 years later, and we started looking at the brand and the evolution of the brand, and we had realized it had grown up quite a bit. And the parallel I draw with it is, if you look at the Apple brand and you go back to 1984 with the commercial of the guy throwing the hammer at the TV, very much a rebel. It was very much positioned as the rebel against IBM and Microsoft and so forth. But I don't know if you have an iPhone or been to an Apple store, and you hold that phone in your hand, you're not thinking rebel today. You think of it as like elegant and classical and sophisticated and smart. So it evolved, even though the rebel was in its DNA, right? And so there was a need in our mind to begin to migrate the brand in that direction. Thus became the positioning of the Rebellion Group that we went back out. Actually, it's almost a year today. It was the rollout of the new brand, and then organized ourselves a little bit differently after that.
And what kind of environment have you created kind of for your employees? Walking into this building, there's some striking features to it that you don't see in every office building. Tell me a little bit about that. And then, Sam, I'll have you weigh on what's drawn you to it.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you two stories, because prior to COVID, it was almost impossible to get people out of here, because of the environment that we created. First of all, we one of the first companies to allow sort of virtual hybrid work, right? I started that with my first business back in 1997, allowing people to work from home, which was unheard of at the time. Fast forward, 2020, and if you aren't working virtually, you're not in business.
You're
right?
way behind the ball.
But on the other side of COVID, and I know you remember this, we had a significant shift in the way people thought about the world and themselves and so forth, and there was just a need for change, right? And so we battled heavily, attrition in a window there, and just tried everything we could to keep people here, because of what we do is so hot, the skill set is so hot, and the market just kept rising and rising and rising and rising, because you could live anywhere in the world and do this type of work. You can imagine everyone was a competitor now. So it changed a lot of what was originally the rebel, what it meant to be a rebel here. So we had to evolve it, just as the brand evolved, right? And so I began identifying a different type of person that we were looking for a little further down the path in their career and so forth. Realigned what it meant in terms of our values to be here and so forth, And so the version of today is a much more grown-up version of what started 13 years ago. And I would say you came in, just pre-rebrand and repositioning. So, and I think that you kind of saw the old and the new, right? Yeah. And then maybe if you remember enough the old, what did you see that maybe the difference between the two,
Well, I think it was more like visually and kind of like, aesthetically, it's very much the same, right? It's just, there's a very premium feel. I think, when you walk into these doors. And, that's one of the things that kind of struck me first when I visited was, it felt like Cheshire out there and New York in here almost. But I think like when it comes to,
and he means amazing out there in Cheshire.
well, yeah,
amazing in here, right?
I'm just,
you get the best of both worlds,
but
right?
this is like very much an environment that I think you'd find in, major metropolitan areas, right? And it has that sleek sophistication to it. Which is awesome because, it's an environment that, is fun to work in, right? You feel good when you're in a good place. So, but I think when it comes to like us and, as a brand from Rebel Interactive to Rebellion Group, I think the feeling is moving up and leveling up, right? Because of the fact, like Bryn said, we are winning larger businesses in, nationally, internationally. And now I feel like our aesthetic, the way we talk about ourselves, the group as well as the individual agencies that sit under the Rebellion umbrella, there's that sense of depth and nuance. And I think, like, to your point, like that sense of maturity. And I think that lends itself to us being in conversations that potentially we weren't in, years ago.
Yeah, it is. Before, not that there's anything wrong with the brand before, but there's a maturation that occurred. There was almost now a sense of belonging that we were trying to build into the brand, and not having to sort of look over your shoulder that are we good enough, right? Just because of, what came before and so forth. So all of that's an evolution. We're never done, in terms of the growth and the progression, but we were talking the other day, about mission values, and what we arrived at is if you could like boil it all down, what it means to be here and why we're here and so forth, which is, I think, is important, right? And I boiled it down to 2 words now. It's pursue excellence is what I'm after, right? And what that simply means is every day when you're here, I'm looking for you to be the best version of yourself. Now, I recognize on some days, the best version you can give me is a 70% version of you. But that's because you don't feel well or just had a bad night or whatever. But I'm expecting that version of you, right? It also extrapolates out to our customers, right? When we are pursuing excellence at every turn, that's the promise to our customers too. We're doing the best we possibly can at every possible turn. You can expect nothing less than that from when you work with us.
So we mentioned just the makeup of this, office space. We're here in Cheshire. You said, just looking at it on the outside and then coming in, I know that this was very strategically put together. Every room has a different name. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and the naming of the rooms began with the first several offices. We had a Skywalker room, we had a Princess Leia room. So not all of them are necessarily real world rebels or heroes, but they're all what we consider rebels, right? And so when we moved into the building, we immediately began the process of getting people's thoughts on how we could begin to name and make up. And so we had this huge list, right? And ultimately had to get down to a list of, like 25 to 30. So there's about 30 individual rooms here, and all of them are strategically named. And as you look around the rooms, you'll see that we've tried a little bit of choreography around, like in this room, if you look behind you, the albums of Aretha Franklin and so forth, and the colors, and they're all different. The idea was that, when you go into most corporate America cubicle farm kind of thing, everything is exactly the same. Everything's the exact same color. All the cubicles are exactly the same. And it feels so like, what I want to work here kind of thing. I've never been to your offices, so I assume they're amazing. And so we tried to be different, right? We wanted it different. We wanted people to feel like this was different, special, and a place that they would want to be. The second piece of that was, everything is an open environment, and unlike only other than a couple of rooms that are sort of the offices of the leadership, everything is like open. You can move. You can have meetings in every room, even in all of the senior leadership's rooms. Those are actually conference rooms too. So everyone has what we call like a home base here. In other words, where they would sort of come in and hang their coat, if you will. But then throughout the day, you'll be moving all over the building based on where the meetings are taking place. So the idea was that to get people and teams to cross connect, so that you're not just in a specific area, but everybody sees themselves as one part of one whole.
And tell me about the team, Sam. Talk about kind of who you work with here. And you know, I know this Shaping Connecticut's Future. I want to talk into kind of where that birthed, and how it was kind of the minds that are here.
Yeah. I mean, so like just thinking about the staff and the team of Rebels, you know, I mean, our service offerings are really varied in terms of like the touch points in the marketing ecosystem. And so, you know, when you think about some of the projects that we take on, you know, who we work with as the internal team is going to vary like any other business or agency. But I'll start with this, like our studio, right? We have a full production studio with amazing videographers, graphic designers, animators. You know, we have a large team of tech and development experts, and because we're building apps, we're building websites, you know, we're building SaaS products. We've got an awesome creative team who are just coming up with amazing ideas, and, you know, pushing out things that will challenge clients that are could be serious, could be irreverent. I think we're of the mind when we start a project that, you know, there's no single like source of strength in terms of the ability to deliver. We have to work together. And so there's a lack of ego, which is great. And there is a wealth of willingness to pitch in and roll up your sleeves.
If you've, now that you've been to the physical building, why don't you answer your question specifically, right? Now that you've been to the physical building, when I saw the building before I bought it, and I saw the large warehouse in the back, right? Immediately I saw a big empty box. And in that big empty box, what could I do in it, right? And, you know, once you start to look at it, like what could be produced in here? Well, immediately it was like video production, you know, think music videos and so forth done. You know, could we host birthday parties in here? Yes, you could. Could you play basketball in there? Yes, you could, right? You know, and on and on and on. But
I think you play pickleball in there too.
You could play pickleball in there. But could you also host events in here? And sure enough, you could, right? And so that became a unique feature of the building. And since it's literally sitting there, they're like, okay, we got to start using it in this way. So it began humbly, the series, right? You know, we decided to like, we'll just pick a day, we'll start inviting some people and see who shows up, right? Realize that it struck a nerve, right? And began to, you know, hatch the concept of the brand, you know. Both of us feel very passionately about this idea that somebody has to care about the state. You know, somebody has to stand up and work alongside some of the work that Anthony and others are doing, you know, and because of the way the building is set, it was like, we were in a perfect position to start to do something different and meaningful to affect people's lives, to benefit them and so forth. So it began the beginning of this series, right? So it's a little bit of because the warehouse was there, right? And because it aligned with who we were as people and what we were trying to do and his events background, all that stuff we talked about. So sometimes it takes circumstance like that to align, right? So we started leaning into those things that we thought made it special and began to fabricate the Shaping CT's brand.
Now, were some of these discussions in terms of the, you know, the topics, discussions that you were having with your clients about, you know, doing business or things like that? Or was this just more of a, you know, big approach to how can we make Connecticut a better place? Yeah,
I'm going to answer and then you can take it, you know? So
say a good idea and then maybe I'll say it again in a different way and claim credit for it.
Every one of the events is connected to what we believe are hot points in the marketplace at the time, right? You know, and so if you go back and look at why are we doing AI and cybersecurity next week, right? Well, think about the number of headlines about what's happening with AI, you know, everything from DeepSeek just 2 weeks ago, you know, to what's happening with cybersecurity and constant phishing and so forth. So it affects everyone, right? You back up a couple ago and we were focused on Connecticut's negative self-image and why that is important and why that needs to shift if the state really intends to grow, right? And on and on and on. So we're picking topics we believe are relevant to the marketplace and then inviting the core constituents to help drive that. And then the audience makeup of each of the events varies dramatically based on the content of the session.
So the first event was when?
That was in February of last year.
February of last year. Yeah. So about a year ago, for those listeners who aren't as familiar, you guys launched this kind of event series, Shaping Connecticut's Future, each having a different topic, bringing in hundreds of people, quite literally, into this space, networking, followed by some discussions really focused on that topic.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when we started it, I remember we were sitting in the room in BJ's office, I think, actually, and we were talking about what is the thought leadership program that we want to roll out, because it was right off the back of the rebrand that we had. And so, I always remembered it as me coming up with the idea. And then I was told that BJ had maybe said something before, and BJ's our chief strategy officer. Then I heard about this thing called, what is it? Crypto amnesia. And then I don't know if I've ever actually had an original idea in my entire life, which is concerning, but the idea was hatched. And the cool thing about it, is that Shaping CT's Future, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of, how we can approach that, right? And so the first event, we had about 90 people. Then we had 4 more events throughout the year. For this first event, we've got over 550 people registered. And I think there's a few reasons for the success of the series so far. One, I think, is the internal drive that we have and the tenacity that we have to produce an excellent show and series. 2, and I always like to say, I don't think that we produce conferences. I like to say that we produce experiences. There's no reason that you can't have fun at these things. And so we want people to network. We want them to have a drink. We want to have intelligent conversation. And we also provide the ability for, companies to come here in our halls and exhibit and showcase who they are and what they do. We obviously have a vested interest in the success of the state because, we're born here. I
wasn't born here.
Well, you know what I mean, the agency. So we're from here in terms of the agency. We have a large portion of our client base here. If we can get people in the room that can help inform what's going on, with important topics that are influencing business decisions, then our clients can be more successful. Ultimately, if Connecticut's more successful, then so are we. And so the other thing that I think that has really helped is the fact that our mission is not unlike the mission of CBIA, So when you are trying to achieve something and push in a direction that is a shared mission with organizations such as the CBIA, Metro Hartford, DECD, then all of a sudden you have, it's not just you doing it, So we have these organizations pitching in, coming in, willing to lend their thoughts, their time, their expertise. And I think it starts to become a coalition, which is awesome.
Is there anything that you learned from the first that first year of series?
Lots.
But is there anything this year that you're really hoping to shift to? What can people who've come to many of them and are looking to come back, what can they expect? We
came out of the energy event last November and realized, we had the head of Eversource, the head of Avangrid, the head of the Dominion Energy, and a bunch of other very important people in the room, and they had amazing conversation, right? And we're congratulating ourselves on producing a 500 plus person discussion with amazing content and lots of media partners and all kinds of accolades and so forth. And you come out the backside the next day and you're like, okay, so what did we just do? What changed, right? And the answer is nothing, right? And that doesn't work. And so the next day I called the discussion with Sam and I said, you know what? I don't know how you're feeling about this, but I'm feeling like that was an amazing session, but it has to be about more than just getting people in the room. There has to be next, right? We have to be able to a path forward from here. How do we take the momentum from this and begin to build on it, right? So we have reset and rejiggered the format now, and you immediately change the narrative, about not necessarily coming to just an event. We're referring as a movement, right? When you're coming, you're part of. There's surveys going out ahead of time. We partnered with a research partner to start helping gaining this information. We're producing distillations on the backside, and we're assimiling many think tanks in every case now begin to carry the mission forward. So this is just the beginning, of each of the sessions. And there are steps now of what comes next that we're really focused on, so that it begins to build on the small inertia we created. The idea is to continue to carry it forward. It's a big focus for us this year.
Yeah, and I think too, it's the data capture off the back of these events. When you think about like with the energy event, like the kind of people that we had there, and it wasn't just the utility companies. It was, there were folks from Pura, from
wind,
yeah,
air, solar.
There's a lot of people that aren't often in a room so publicly
Yeah,
together.
I mean, like between the panels and the welcome speakers, we had 20 of the most important people in energy in the state, and we didn't capture that, right? And so that's another, like in line with this change that we're trying to drive, is the ability to. We're going to be filming it. We're going to be capturing the audio. We're going to be transcribing that. We're going to be feeding that through our own AI platform that we have called Kraken. We're going to start generating themes, conduct, in-depth analysis, and ultimately recommendations. And that is a tangible product from the event that we can then work with private or public entities.
Not also policy, getting policy
Well,
makers.
yeah, exactly.
That's also important. All of this is just words without getting the policymakers involved. So a shift to involving so you'll see there will be multiple politicians now that actually connect and vote on this kind of stuff. In many cases, we're asking them ahead of time on said topic, what of this is important to you? What of this are you trying to drive forward? So we can create some momentum around that. I think that's
and have some
super
meaningful conversations in that way.
And I think like the last big change, I think, outside of the ability to have, like Great Blue Research, who's our research partner, and the whole data capture and leverage angle that we're taking, is we want to expose the content to folks outside of our doors. We can only fit so many people here. So we've partnered with Fox 61 to live stream the panel discussions, the podcasts that'll be taking place. And so now this content exists outside of our walls, and people anywhere in Connecticut, can view it and can, hopefully benefit from what's being said. So we continue to evolve. It'll change most likely again. I think that's kind of the nature of what we do here, is we start to say, what if we did this? And then as long as it's not too harebrained, Bryn will say, yeah, we can test that out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be really cool. And we're just going to see what happens and push forward.
Great. Well, we're really looking forward to it. I know this AI event, and AI and cybersecurity this week. So we'll look forward to that, and people can continue to look at that, Shaping Connecticut's Future, for more information about the series. So now shifting gears a little bit, I kind of want to go back to where we started. And you both have had very interesting careers, have led large and small teams. Can you talk to me about, one or two leadership lessons that you kind of carry in the back of your mind or have really stuck with you, maybe either since the beginning or more recently?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. I think it's interesting, like, you're exposed to a lot of opportunities to lead and follow in the military. I've seen good leaders and I've seen bad, and I've tried to kind of park what the bad ones do and really absorb and take forward what the good ones do. And what I've always tried to do is kind of like think about a couple different things, which is like, not everybody is going to respond the same way to direction and, requests or whatever it is you're trying to task people out to do. Like, so having that ability to kind of like use a good deal of empathy in order to try to understand like the kind of person that you're working with and what is going to motivate them in order to get the best out of them. I think that's what I've tried to do is tried to understand and read people and figure out, like, based on how I think your head works, this is the most effective way to engage you, to try and get the best out of you. And it's not a one size fits all piece. So that's one. And then, there's kind of like the basic things, which is like, don't ask people to do what you're not willing to do yourself. And the more humble you are, I think you are as a leader, the more people are going to want to follow you. So there's that, that servant leadership kind of principle or point of view. But, being able to recognize people for their successes, and, sharing that recognition with the folks that are doing it, instead of some folks who will just try and take credit for everything. I think that's a big one in terms of trying to endear yourself to those that ultimately need to take direction from you. So
thank you.
It's cool. What he said.
What about for you, Bryn?
I would say in treating everyone fairly, but not necessarily equally. And I know that sounds like, wait, what? But everyone is constructed differently and needs to be, sort of, it's like a custom approach to everyone, right? So yes, they're all treated fairly, but where they are and what they're capable of is completely unique to them. So if you try sort of a one-size-fits-all approach to management, it's going to fail. And actually, the same thing applies to parenthood. I remember thinking when my first son came through, it was like, normal sort of coaching, teaching, all that kind of stuff. And, and then the second son came through and I tried the same approach. It's like, oh my God, this just is not getting consumed, and so you have to reconfigure to get the same message across, right? It's not one is wrong or worse. It's that, meeting them where they are and understanding how they're wired and what motivates them in order to get the best out of them. I think that would be a key piece. Sam said, don't expect others to do anything you won't do yourself, right? I am very much a believer of that, lead by example. I don't ask anybody to do anything that they don't see me doing. I think that's super important. I am a big believer in being, humble but also confident, right? And I do think those two things can coexist. And so those two things are baked into the brand. And when I see people that I believe are confident and also humble about their success, I'm attracted to those kind of people. You will rarely see a rebel that doesn't align with those two things.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much. This was a really great conversation, and we're looking forward to seeing what the Rebellion Group has in store this year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to this week's BizCast. You can listen, like, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us a review and let us know if you have ideas for a future podcast. And for more episodes, head on over to CBIA.com.